to Her Life Unscripted podcast, inspiring burnt out, stressed out, and stretched thin women to embrace the unscriptedness of life. Hosted by Anna Osborne.
Hello, lovelies, and welcome to Her Life Unscripted, episode 29. I am so excited to be here with you today, and I have to say, going back through the interview that I'm going to share today, going back through it to be able to edit it, I am so appreciative that I did, because it is just this amazing reminder of being able to tune into our bodies and really just gain a lot of awareness about what our bodies are trying to tell us and really honor that voice that our bodies have. And I feel like as we move into this fall season, Halloween's over now, we're moving into the holidays, things can just get so fast-paced and so intense that we totally disconnect from what we need to be our healthiest version of ourselves. And I just love that this episode, even though I recorded the interview a while ago, is now kind of coming out into circulation and that I've had a chance to edit it, because I've just jotted down so many notes, and I know it's going to be a powerful reminder for me as me and my family move through these next few months, and also the clients that I work with. So today we are talking with the wonderful Brodie Welch. She is a licensed acupuncturist and also a board-certified herbalist in Chinese medicine and a self-care strategist. She is got this really great podcast called A Healthy Curiosity. And it's a podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. And I actually met Brodie through a podcasting group that we're a part of. And I just loved what she was talking about, and this concept of how do we, take care of ourselves and be well when there's so many demands in this busy world. And so I reached out to her via email and just said, I love what you're creating and I'd love to get to know you more. And she picked up the phone and called, which was so beautiful in a world of digital, virtual relationships, to just send somebody an email that I really admired their work, and that she picked up the phone and called, and we had just an amazing conversation. And I invited her to come on the show because I'm just really excited for what she's doing. And so I've included the link to her podcast and her website so you guys can find her in the show notes. But her name is Brodie Welch, and she's just amazing, knowledgeable individual. And I'm so excited to be able to share today's podcast with you guys. So I can't wait to hear what you think about it. And I hope you really enjoy it. Well, Brodie, welcome to the show today. I am so excited to have you on this episode and for my audience to get to know you better and all those wonderful things. So I'm just really excited to have you on this episode of Her Life Unscripted. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here, Anna. Thanks for inviting me.
So Brodie and I met online in actually a group of women podcasters. And as soon as I kind of saw what she was about and what she was doing, I had to reach out, and I sent one of those emails like, I hope she doesn't think I'm a stalker. And, right? Like, I'm not a groupie. I just think that what you're doing is amazing. And she picked up the phone and called me and said, email is so stale, let's have a phone conversation. And I just instantly was jazzed about that. So I'm excited about our conversation today. And I actually, Brodie, before we started recording, I gave your formal introduction, but share a little bit with the audience about kind of who you are, so that we can kind of get to know you through your own words.
Sure. Well, I identify as being an acupuncturist, a Chinese medicine expert, and a self-care strategist. So basically what that means is that I help people take care of themselves, understand the body-mind connection, and equip people to really sort of see themselves as an integrated whole of body, mind, and spirit in the way that Chinese medicine can do so beautifully, and to work with people kind of in a coaching capacity as to how they can apply the principles of Chinese medicine to their everyday lives. And so that's kind of what I do in clinic. It's also what I do in the classes that I teach from afar. I lead retreats and workshops, and I have ways that people can work with me that don't involve my actual physical presence. We're like making real such concepts as yin and yang and the living within harmony of the seasons, and being able to get back to some semblance of balance. And so it's my favorite thing in the world to teach people to make choices that are really much more medicinal than any sort of medicine that could be administered from a doctor or alternative medicine practitioner in an hour-long session once a month or whatever. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what really just drew me to, and obviously I mentioned this before, but Brodie has a podcast also called A Healthy Curiosity. And I'll obviously share all that information in the show notes. But what really drew me to your work was this discussion about obviously the mind-body connection. And I think it's a term that gets thrown around, but what does it really mean? And so I would love if you could kind of share your working definition for the audience, because I think it'll be such a foundation for our conversation today.
Wow. I think of it less as something that needs to be defined as redefined, that we think of really the split between body and mind is, I think, an artificially created one that came out of like the Enlightenment. It came out of Rene Descartes, basically I think, therefore I am, and this sort of identification that we in sort of Western modern societies have with thinking, and the primacy of reason over things like intuition and feeling. And then you couple that with things like the Industrial Revolution and the kind of rugged individualism that we have in this country of like the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps, just work harder, work more, be more productive kind of American values. And when what you get is people totally overriding what their bodies are saying to identify with what their minds want and who they think that they should be in this world. And so it's really kind of like there's this, so the body-mind connection, I think, is really more about an integration of like putting reason back in its place, kind of like that, paying attention to our physicality, paying attention to the vessel that our minds travel around in and that our spirits travel around in, if that's vocabulary that works for you, and really paying attention to the whole rest of the human experience, which encompasses love and physical pleasure and physical feeling really at home in our bodies and feeling confident and calm in and comfortable in a way that, regardless of, like, we may have chronic pain, we may have whatever going on, but being able to be at home in our form and to really be embodied. It's like, it's with awareness.
Okay. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I just think that there's something unique about women and our connection with our body and our ability to have that intuition, but also our ability to disconnect. And so I'm going to break that down because it's a huge question. But what do you notice that's specific to women in terms of them being able to be in touch with their being, with their body? Is there anything that you notice to be unique about women and their relationship with their body?
Anything unique about women? Well, I think that I work with mostly women in my practice, so my samples may be skewed, but that may actually, well, but also kind of like, we look at like who is taking yoga, who is coming in for acupuncture, like that. These are predominantly women. And so I think that there is something there in terms of women having an interest in approaching issues going on in their lives from a more embodied place. And that may be just a function of the fact that we have to pay attention so much as hormones fluctuate on a monthly basis in a way that is less obvious to men as they go through their fluctuations. And so it may be that we are accustomed to dropping in and tuning in, to wondering what's going on at various times in our cycle, and that's maybe something that is a bit more culturally accepted. And yet it's also, but I also think that there is a cultural bias at least in our society, that of women paying more attention to what their bodies should look like than what they feel like on the inside. And so I actually kind of feel like there is, for a lot of women, it just breaking that mindset and letting it be okay to experience themselves, to embody themselves, rather than judging from the outside. How does this physical form look in someone else's eyes or through the male gaze?
Yeah, I think, like you're talking about what we look like versus what we feel like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that there's actually an obstacle there to women being embodied. And also that women who've been victims of trauma, of abuse, of rape and things like that, where it maybe hasn't been safe to be in the body. And so it's really, for practical survival purposes, easy to disengage and to override and to just really not even check in very often. So I think while some women may kind of have that sort of naturally dialed in, I think a lot of that safety of just being, our birthright of feeling okay in our bodies, is something that women may disproportionately have lost due to their traumatic life experience.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to raise, is that there are, like you said, more women traditionally doing yoga or seeking out acupuncture, those sorts of things, but also the great deal of women that are very disconnected from their bodies based on trauma or the messages they've gotten around the acceptance of their body, and those sorts of things, that has a huge impact.
Absolutely. And I would add to that too, just that within this day and age where that women are, we're sort of in this post-feminist, we can do it all, we can have these high-powered careers, and we can have these families, and that there's this new cultural ideal that women are these super achievers, and that identity and that feeling like driving and striving to live up to sort of like gigantic expectations can also lead women to override their bodies and to not rest when we're tired and not eat when we're hungry, and just sort of the absolute basics of like basically just identifying with having to achieve and with doing, as opposed to letting it be okay to just be and to just feel. What does it feel like to move in this way? What does it feel like to just rest and read a book before all the work is done? Things like that.
Yes. Oh my gosh, because there's so much self-compassion that's required in order to be able to pay attention to what our body is asking for versus what this kind of overarching societal expectation is that we feel like we're chasing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so in your work with women, can you share a little bit about, somebody coming to you who is, for whatever reason is so disconnected from their body, but they're noticing that they're extremely fatigued, their stress is high, their irritation is high, those sorts of things. What are some of the ways that you are helping them to connect better with their body and really being able to not override the messages that their body is screaming at them?
Well, first of all, if they end up in my practice, it's because they are not happy with how they're feeling, right?
Okay.
They're ready to make a change. And a lot of times just that first step is awareness that what they're used to feeling isn't necessarily what they have to be feeling, right? And I think that all of us can relate to that in the sense that the world looks really different when we've gotten a good night's sleep, right? Versus when we're just totally, when we haven't slept well and we're just maxed out. It's like that. I feel like it's a small thing, but it's a huge thing. Mm-hmm. And so just things like that, and obviously sleep is just one pillar of self-care, but basically what I do as a Chinese medicine practitioner is help people see that, their digestive issue and their anxiety and their chronic muscle soreness might actually be coming from the same things, like the things that look like disparate systems or symptoms are actually connected, and that kind of all of those could be addressed with things like having a breathing practice, having one of the first places I start with people is just teaching them how to downregulate their nervous system, because really the breath is the bridge between what happens automatically and sort of if we're living our lives in this constant state of stress, we're kind of perpetuating the fight or flight chemicals that are going on in the body, and that being able to downshift out of that and into rest and repair mode or rest and digest mode, which is where we should be spending most of our time. The breath is the bridge that helps us cross from that emergency mode to where we should be spending most of our time. And a lot of people don't even realize that that's where they're hanging out, is that stress mode.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
The breath is, yeah. So the breath is usually the first thing that I do with people. And a lot of times and the second thing is going to be having a body mind practice of some kind. And I would define that as anything where your attention, your attention becomes intention, where you pull your awareness inward and you focus it on what's going on in your internal world. And oftentimes that's accompanied with the breath and what your body is doing. So whether that's a stillness, hanging out in a posture, which could be as simple as lying on your back, or which could be as like a flowing Qigong form or a flowing yoga practice or Tai Chi practice, that kind of thing. And that oftentimes having just a few minutes a day of being in the body in that way can really help to mitigate feelings of stress and to really change the chemistry that can be influencing everything from hormone imbalance to digestive issues to fertility to a whole host of problems.
Well, and I think what's so fascinating about this, I love that you're talking about our breath as the bridge, right? Because I think that I'm such a believer in intention and being able to, that what we seek, we find, that really creating that intention and that space for it is so important. But I think that it's so, I don't want to say contradictory, but it is contradictory to what the message we're being given, that we have to have big, bold movements, that things have to be dynamic and huge rather than something as small as a breath. And being able to have that connection with it and creating that, attention becomes intention. It seems so small that oftentimes people don't believe it's enough.
Oh yeah, it's small and it's something that we can do ourselves anytime and it's free.
Yeah,
how can that possibly work?
Right, exactly. It's like it's so different from all these other messages that we're being given kind of in the mainstream media about bigger, better, louder, faster. And being able to have our breath as a bridge, like you said, it's free, it's easy, it's always accessible, but yet we doubt that it has the significance to connect us to a more connected place.
Yeah, it's huge. It's the first thing if you've ever been in, for example, a car accident first thing that an EMT is going to say is, breathe, right? Take a deep breath. They want you to get a handle on your breath so that you don't go into shock. It is it is the most powerful thing that you can do in order to lead the nervous system where you want it to go.
Yeah.
And so it's also a reflection. It's, that to figure out how you're doing, really paying attention to your breath and its qualities. If it's choppy and rough and uneven, chances are that's a reflection of where your mind is and where your nervous system is. And so it's one of the simplest breathing meditations can be simply to bring the qualities of gentleness, evenness, and slowness. And just to concentrate on, first of all, what's the breath doing? Tune into it and observe it without any judgment. And then to work with trying to make it a little bit more even on the inhale and exhale, and watching just after a few minutes what happens to the rest of your body. It's a pretty quick experiment, but it's the kind of thing where like we don't just eat once a day and hope that just sustains us through. It's like super helpful to breathe ourselves as in addition to feeding ourselves several times a day.
Oh, I love that. Well, and I've got 4.5-year-olds, and my son he gets himself quite worked up. And what I've tried to do with him is help him to kind of regulate his breathing, because he can't converse or problem solve when he is in that place of just flood and panic. And so
none of us can.
Right. None of us can. Like he is no better or worse than us. And so sometimes I'll say, Bud, you just got to breathe for a second. And he's in such a place of panic. He'll say, this little like crying voice, I don't know how to do it right now. And so, I'll have him sit on my lap and I'll just kind of hold him and I'll breathe. And pretty much within, 4 or 5 breaths, he's then following just kind of the rhythm of my body. He's following it too. But it's so funny because the reading and things like that is, kids need to figure it out on their own. They've got to self-regulate. And I do believe that at a point, but he's in this moment of panic. And so me saying, pull it together so we can discuss this is so far outside of the realm of possibilities. But he
has no idea how, right?
Absolutely.
You're giving him a path towards self-regulation.
Right. Absolutely. Which I totally agree with. And so being able to just sit with him in that moment of like, okay, let's slow you down. Yeah, you're still going to need to take some time to yourself because you just walloped your sister, but we still need to get you to a place where you can actually do that because he is so dysregulated. But it's such a good reminder when he's in that place of flood, when he says like, I don't know how to do it, of me going, oh, you're right. Like you need to slow down with him and help him with this because he's asking for it. And he doesn't yet have the ability to figure that breathing part out on his own, but yet it's so vital.
Yeah. And it's, and I think you said that he is watching you to breathe. Like
usually he'll sit on my lap. And so I'll kind of, hug him, but I'll breathe.
Nice.
And then pretty soon he's able to rhythm it with me.
That's awesome. So you're really giving him that embodied sense of what it's like to breathe in a relaxed way. And that's the kind of thing people can do for themselves, just literally putting a hand on a heart and hands on a belly and breathing and feeling the expansion of each of these zones in the body. Or it's the kind of thing where in Qigong, for example, we couple the movement with the breath. So we might inhale and float the arms up towards the sky and exhale as we descend the arms down the front of the body, and just kind of make this, just pairing that breath with movement in these really gentle ways can be really meditative and can, kind of give us something. So a lot of times people feel like meditation is this like austere practice that they can't do because their minds are too busy. And it's like pairing the breath with movement for a lot of people is way easier than like sitting there with your eyes closed and trying to get a handle on breathing.
Yeah, that's a really great point to be able to think of it like that. Absolutely.
That's really kind of like, it's true in yoga as well as in Qigong. In Qigong, we think about the yin and yang, right? And the dance between the two. And in yoga, the concept of spanda, that expansion and contraction pulsating of the universe. And so it's like we have that in a microcosm form with our breath.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, share a little bit about that, about kind of, one of the things that I wanted you to share about, because I really don't know anything about it, is the yang addiction. What is that?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Please share with me. I'm super interested when you wrote about that. I said, I've got to know more.
Yang addiction is something that I personally suffer from and that a lot of the people that I work with suffer from. So if we wanted to define the terms yin and yang, that might help. So everyone's probably familiar with the black and white swirls that are intersecting each other, that the yin yang symbol, it's everywhere. And really the black part of that symbol is the yin, and there's always a little dot of white in the black and a little dot of black in the white, so that like the yin and yang are inseparable. And the goal of any Chinese medicine treatment is to create balance in the body by balancing these two oppositional forces of yin and yang. So yin is the force of stillness and coolness and solidness, slowness, gentleness, receptivity, intuition, physicality. Basically, that which enables us to stay calm and to stay cool and reflective. And yang is its counterpart, right? Basically the opposite in all of that regard. So it's the active, the busy, the doing, the light, the warming, productive, that kind of energy. And that's the kind of energy that our culture really glorifies. And so if you identify as a doer and you like getting things done and you can't stop, basically, like for me, it's like when I get into my yang addiction, I'm workaholic. I am valuing my own self-worth based on what I'm doing rather than how much love I can exude. I'd make excuses for like cutting my meditation practice short so that I can go get more stuff done on the computer. And, it's the kind of thing where if I didn't need my workouts to stay sane, well, it's the kind of thing where like I'll do the physical push it to the limit kind of a workout, but I won't necessarily do my soft, subtle practice of stretching and opening into my body in a more yin way. So I see yang addiction as like when we bite that hook and believe that we are what we do, essentially, and that nothing else matters. And I really feel it so much like someone who is addicted to alcohol or drugs or whatever, because when I'm out of it, I can't even imagine like the altered state of consciousness that I must have been in at the time, because I make totally different choices.
Yes. Oh, that's so, so true. I think that's such a powerful addiction, but also one that, like you said, that a lot of us suffer from.
It's super ubiquitous, I think. And I think that, there's actually in one of my courses, I have a yang addiction self-assessment of, are you yang addicted? Because it's the kind of thing where people, that it motivates so many things that people say that they don't want in their lives. Like whether that's too much caffeine or sugar to keep going, or whether that is feeling disconnected from their hearts or feeling disconnected from their bodies. And like, there's very real consequences for this addiction.
Yeah. And I think that what you're saying is so important, because oftentimes people will verbalize that they don't want those in their lives anymore, but also feeling very trapped of how to be able to break that cycle and move to a place where they can create that balance and not feel like their value or their worth is then compromised.
Absolutely. Right. So there's kind of a twofold issue. And that sort of the first one is being able to to really grasp the value of the yin, to really, which I think for women, it's going to be honoring the body, honoring the intuition, honoring the softness, the slowness, and being able to appreciate the subtle, so a practice like breathing or like Qigong, where that takes us inward in this subtle way, is a way of breaking yang addiction. It's like fundamentally bringing it back to these subtler realms and to to really just spending some time in the complete opposite. And so it's really, it's a revaluation. It also requires that our ego shift a little bit, right? Because it requires detaching from who we think we are as the doer.
Yeah, and all the external reinforcers that come from, the accolades or those sorts of things that come from being in that doer mode.
Absolutely, because it's a really safe place to be, where, like, kind of right where what most people value or what our society in general values. So taking a step back from that, it's like, yeah, if you're an overachiever, if you've been overserving and overworking, it can be really scary to stop doing that. Otherwise, we'd just do it, right?
Right,
because it
absolutely.
doesn't feel good to be overriding the body in all these different ways.
Yeah. I had a really interesting experience a couple months ago. I've got a group of girlfriends that I grew up with, and I saw one of their moms, and right now I just work out of the home 2 days a week, and I used to work 3, and I dropped a day just because there was, my son was needing me a little bit more at home, and my daughter, of course, loved it too. And so I shared with my friend's mom. She asked how things were going, and I said, oh, I'm down to working 2 days a week, and so that's going really well. And she said, she goes, how are you doing that? You're a workaholic. And yeah, and it was really interesting because it was not meant as a critical, as that my ear heard it as a criticism. And so I kind of, she meant it as like a compliment, like, wow, you're such a hard worker. How is that to step away from work? And I sat with it for about a week. And then I brought it up to my husband and I said, do you think I'm a workaholic? And he kind of got that look in his eyes like, oh crap. Like,
is this a trick question?
Right, do these jeans make me look fat? Like he kind of like, he stopped for a second and he said, well, if you worked like you do the days that you're outside of the house, I would be really concerned for you. And I really took that in and heard it, because what he sees, and I think what a lot of people see, is the 2 days that I'm out of the house they are packed, they are intense. I am getting things done. And then the rest of the time when I'm home with my littles, it is a lot of, going to the gym, swimming, going to the park. Like it's more stillness. It's sitting and reading stories. It's, doing different things like that. And so it was very eye-opening to me to see kind of what other people see, how they perceive it, and also being able to really reflect on myself of the days that I'm out of the house, of how do I actually create more stillness in it so it isn't so black and white between my work days and my home days. Because I think that was also causing a lot of stress internally, physically for me, of the pace I was keeping outside the home. But it was very interesting to have that reflected to me, and really how my ear and my body heard it.
Yeah, right. Like it could, because what if somebody catches you doing less than you're capable of?
Yes.
Like, and at the same time, your mother meant it as, she was in awe, she's like, wow, that's awesome. You're really doing something challenging by stepping back from work a bit more. It also sounds like you're creating that you've created a rhythm for yourself, where on the days that you're out of the house, you're in yang mode and you're busy and you're doing, but then that's not most of the time.
Yeah.
That's 2 days a week. And that the rest of your week is a much more balanced yin and yang blend, where you're obviously taking care of a little one, but at the same time, the things that you're doing in that day aren't about speed and productivity and maxing it out. It's like you're able to be present, to read stories and to go to the park and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that, so much, even I think psychotherapy, we've always been told to, be that blank slate and all those sorts of things. But I really do believe in a lot more transparency. And so it also made me realize that if I'm talking with the folks that I work with about creating stillness and about creating space and connecting with breath and connecting with body, that if they just see me in work mode, they're going to feel an inconsistency. They're going to think, wait a second, here's this person who is in go mode and she's talking to us about still mode. And so it made me also reflect of how can I create more transparency in between what it looks like when I'm here in the office compared to what it looks like when I'm working in the home. And so it was very interesting of kind of trying to see it from all sides.
Yeah, and it's beautiful to want to embody that because you are in some senses a role model for the people that you work with, or you're trying to live your life according to these principles, and that being able to really walk your talk, it's very much, I feel very, very called to account by the fact that I'm working with patients and I don't want to be a hypocrite either. And
Right.
and yet it's still definitely something I struggle with, and that I try to be pretty open about that struggle, because it isn't easy, and it's totally worth it. It's totally worth the work to step back from yang addiction, and to really have practices that keep me sane.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think too, like you said, not wanting to be a hypocrite or not wanting to ask people that are trusting me to work with them to do anything that I'm also not challenging myself to be doing.
Exactly.
It's, what's good for them is also good for me. Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about, the work that you do, one of them also is being able to really work with women around stress relief. And so is there places in particularly women's bodies or things that you've noticed in working with women where they really hold their stress or discount the impact stress is having on their bodies?
That's a great question, because it can be very individualized. And actually, can I nerd out on Chinese medicine for a second?
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
I love
All
to
right.
nerd out on stuff. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So in Chinese medicine, each of the different internal organs corresponds with, or has a job that transcends what we would think of it as. So like, yes, the liver is this organ that detoxifies and helps us digest, but it's also, with a capital L, the liver can be thought of as the main organ responsible for the smooth, free, and easy flow of energy in the body. And anytime we're stressed out, that smooth flow of energy isn't so smooth anymore. And we call that liver qi stagnation. So basically the energy of the liver, is like no longer powering the body in a smooth way. And that's basically, like, it can be kind of a rough translation of how stress first manifests for people. But because all the different systems of the body interrelate with one another, a lot of things can happen. So when energy just gets pent up in the liver, one of the things that happens is you get the tight neck and shoulders, and energy rises to the head, and people get kind of chronic headaches or chronic neck tension. It could show up in the throat area as the thyroid. Like that's one of the first things that can get thrown off. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal thyroid gonadal axis, like all of that is related, and really, so any hormone imbalance can be thought of as starting with that, or exacerbated by the liver qi stagnating. Also, the liver's mother, quote unquote, is the kidneys, which is sort of like the our reserve energy of the body. So when we start depleting our reserves, that's kind of when the chronic liver qi stagnation or chronic overwork helps. We then look to our reserve energy to shore it up. And so it could be showing up as things like fertility issues, or really anything going on with the menstrual cycle, which is dependent on both liver and kidney. For some people, they'll feel stress immediately in their stomach, right, in their gut, and that can be the liver overacting on the spleen and stomach. So the spleen and stomach are the organs of digestion. You can feel, either like that sort of nervous stomach or IBS, irritable bowel syndrome symptoms, things like ulcers, acid reflux, just alternating constipation and loose stool. That can all, like our gut flora that we need to help us digest well, can't survive if we're chronically stressed. So a lot of times women will feel stress in the gut. I mentioned hormones. A lot of times it can be showing up in terms of just mentally. Feelings of anxiety or depression or mood disorders can obviously be made worse by stress. Essentially, hanging out in a stress response until it's habit is one of the ways we become anxious. And so that it's absolutely like all the physiological stuff that goes along with that. Sleep problems directly related to stress. And so in terms of where that is in the body, it's sort of less one specific part, but we can think of it as like that if the liver is responsible for that easy and smooth flow of qi in the body, when we can't transition from day to night very easily, that's an example of that lack of smooth flow of qi. Or like in the digestive system, the lack of smooth flow of qi makes things wonky or go in the wrong direction. And in the menstrual cycle, same thing. If it's crampy or PMSy or that kind of thing, it's a lack of smooth flow of energy there, and a lack of of an easy unfolding of the menstrual cycle. So I see it showing up there. It can also make any other condition, like practically any other condition that someone may have going on, worse, whether that's allergies or asthma, respiratory stuff, whether it's an autoimmune condition. There's basically no end to the conditions that stress can worsen, depending on kind of where your own personal roof leaks when it rains.
Oh, I love that you shared so much information, because I think that's so important for the audience about it. But also recognizing from what you said at the very beginning of this is that when women come to you, they're coming because something doesn't feel right. Right. And so they're not necessarily able to pinpoint it in the way of saying, this is the issue. They're coming to you with all these questions and the hope of being able to discover it with you. But that our bodies they are these amazing alarm systems that are trying their hardest to let us know that something is off. And we become so conditioned to ignore it or numb it or, just stuff it away, disconnect from it, rather than really leaning in and being able to listen to what our body is trying to tell us.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I remember years ago, I actually had gallstones in my late 20s, I think it was. It was very bizarre. But I remember going to the hospital and not knowing what it was. And the ER doc couldn't figure it out. And I was just in an insane amount of pain. And he looked at my husband and he said, it might just be indigestion. And my husband was like, yeah, do you think you could check a few more things out? Because she's pretty clued in with her body that I don't think that, she's saying something is really, really wrong. And lo and behold, they figured it out, but they were ready to just kind of dismiss it and go, she's in pain, she's fine. And really trying, no, she kind of feels what's going on. Just pay attention a little bit.
Yeah. Well, way to advocate for yourself and for him to point out that, yes, you do know yourself better than
a little bit of heartburn.
You wouldn't be necessarily there if it weren't something to pay attention to.
Yeah,
that's really important, is that your experience is valuable wisdom.
Yeah, and I think that's just a great reminder for all of us that if if something doesn't feel right, whether it's emotionally or physically, that our being is trying to tell us something, and really to be able to honor that and trust it and seek to explore it, whether it's through our physical being, our emotional being, the connection of all of it is seeking out support so that we can figure out what feels off rather than just ignore it.
Yes, absolutely. I could not agree with that more. And seeing your symptoms as an invitation, right? Seeing it as not something to be beaten into submission, but as a signal from the body that something's going on that's worth paying attention to.
Oh, goodness gracious. I love that. I'm going to have to re-listen to that place and write it down, because I think that's such a good reminder or a good reframe of how we can use our symptoms as tools rather than something to be squashed, like you said.
It's such and I think actually for women, the menstrual cycle is such an excellent little report card as to what's going on, things like that. Or, as an acupuncturist, I'm constantly asking people, about their poop and things like that, just like basic stuff that happens every day, looking and noticing, because our body's full of interesting information for us. And rather than just going, that's weird, and moving on, that's actually could be a really interesting clue as to how the whole system might get better.
Yeah. Or not popping on WebMD and putting in some symptoms.
Right, exactly. Right. And in Chinese medicine, we look at, we think about the root and the branch of what's going on. And the branch is the symptom that might be talking to you. But the root, the same root might be giving rise to 5 different branches that the same person has going on. And so rather than seeing those 5 things as separate things that need separate doctors and separate treatments, that looking at perhaps what could be something that's tying this together, and could we therefore use not only acupuncture and herbs, but lifestyle and diet and things that you can do on your own as ways of addressing that same root.
Oh, so beautiful. So beautiful. Well, Brodie, I'm so excited that we had this chance to talk today. And I want to be mindful, because I know you've got life going on around you too. So before we kind of, wrap today, is there anything else that you would like to be able to, any last pieces of kind of encouragement that you'd be able to share with our audience as we're kind of moving towards closing out our time together?
Yeah, I would love to encourage everyone listening to be good to yourselves, and to think about or to feel into a sacred commitment that this is something that I encourage people to do with that recognizing like, what is the one thing right now that I could do differently in my daily life that would have the biggest ripple effect. So whether that is perhaps having a subtle body practice, or breathing, or exercising, or up-leveling your food choices, or making more time for your friends and family, or yourself, or your passion, or whatever it is, that identify that one step and make it sacred, make it utterly non-negotiable, and that maybe you won't have the hour or two that you would like to have for it, but make sure that you're doing it for at least a little while, even if it's just a breath's worth or even a few minutes each and every day.
Oh my goodness, that is just amazing encouragement. I can see the audience being able to so utilize that. And so I want to I will definitely, like I said, include in the show notes the link to your podcast and your work too, but tell people how they can find you, because I think that you've got so much to offer this world, and I would love for people to be able to connect with you and the great work that you're doing.
Oh, and I would love to be able to connect with women who are wanting to take better care of themselves. And they can find me online at brodiewelch.com. That's Brodie with an IE and Welch with a CH. And they can check out the podcast which is called A Healthy Curiosity, and that's in iTunes. And there's a link to that from my website as well.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Brodie, thank you so much for just being so generous of your time and chatting with me today. I just feel like this is a conversation that I want to come back to. And I would love that, if we, when folks are listening, if you guys have questions and you want to be able to kind of have Brodie and I discuss it, like send them over. We can definitely, do some fun editing to be able to answer your guys' questions and kind of put it into another format, another show and things like that. Because we would love to be able to really just support everybody on their journey of being more connected, more embodied, and really being able to, move away from that yang addiction like you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been super fun. And yes, totally, I would love to stay connected and answer whatever questions come up.
Fantastic. That was such a great interview, and I'm so just honored and privileged that Brodie took the time to come on the show and just share so much of her knowledge with us. There is so much that stood out to me around this interview, but I think the part about her talking as women being at home in our bodies and really moving to this embodied place where we're looking at ourselves as whole and connected, and that we need to be able to give attention to those things that our body needs and not get into this kind of yang addiction that she talks about, where we move into a place of valuing ourselves based on what we're doing rather than the love and the intentionality that we're leading in our lives. So she's just got so much knowledge, and I really am excited to hear how you guys connected with the interview and what stood out for you, because there's just a lot of pieces that stood out for me. One thing that she talked about, I think that really just is so important as we move into this holiday season, is talking about how women, particularly women, we have these, this driving and striving that really creates these gigantic expectations that lead us to overriding the signals that our bodies are telling us, and that we identify with what our minds want and who we should be in the world rather than what our bodies are telling us. And I know for me, that's something that I struggle with. I'm so mindful about working with my clients on being, mindful of their bodies and listening to their bodies and honoring their bodies as a very strong, important voice. And I know sometimes I personally fall short of being able to actually do that. And I've noticed that as I write things down or create that, attention becomes intention, and what I'm paying attention to actually becomes the intention with where and how I'm living my life, that I don't tend to struggle with those things as much, that I'm able to really listen into my body and recognize that my breath and all these, fatigue or overwhelm, that those really come from a place of overriding what my body needs with rest and meditation and prayer and exercise and just emitting love and having love in the relationships around me. So I'm so excited that you guys got a chance to meet Brodie. She's just really, really knowledgeable. Like I said, I included the link to her podcast as well as her website, so you guys can get in touch with her. I know she'd love to hear from you and really just share with how you guys connected with her in the interview. So I really encourage you guys to do that. And please reach out to me too, to Anna at Her Life Unscripted. I would love to hear about how the interview impacted you and really how you're going to utilize it as a way to integrate into kind of more of a wholeness, or being able to really put that reason back in its place, like she talked about, rather than overriding our bodies and ignoring all the things that it's trying to tell us. So I hope you guys have a lovely, lovely rest of your week. I so appreciate you taking the time to listen to the episode. And I really encourage you, if you have not yet, please go on to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. It would be so fantastic to hear what your guys' thoughts are on the show. And I'm so appreciative of those of you that have left a rating already and a review, kind of type in a few words to tell me what you love best about the podcast. It's so great to hear your guys' encouraging, supportive words, and just continues to give me inspiration to record the podcast each week and really make sure that it's coming out to you, all of you. So thank you so much for letting me into your world and into your hearts. And I just hope you have an amazing, amazing week, because you all deserve it. Take care.
Want to learn about the latest retreats, workshops, and speaking events hosted by Anna? Head over to herlifeunscripted.com to get in on all the juicy details. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast so we can continue to grow our amazing audience. Lastly, be sure and send in your voice feedback via the SpeakPipe app or to Anna@herlifeunscripted.com. We can't wait to hear from you.